Do you ever wish your day wasn't dictated by your health? Are you tired of being tired all the time, or is pain holding you back from enjoying your time with your family? Would you like to manage your symptoms holistically, but you just don't know where to begin? I am so excited you're here. This podcast will help you understand how natural remedies work so you can relieve your symptoms and live a fuller life. My name is Penny. I'm an occupational therapist, past pharmaceutical rep, mom, and wife with a strong faith, and for 25 years, I battled through debilitating Crohn's disease. I took all the medicine and did all the surgeries that stole so much of my time with my family but never truly healed me. I finally realized if I was going to survive this disease, I needed to open my stubborn eyes to alternative solutions. I researched how perfectly our bodies work with plants and a lifestyle that made my health less of a burden to my family and aligned so beautifully with my faith and my medical training. If you're ready to reclaim your life with holistic options that are easy to implement as a busy mom and provide relief that lasts, this is the podcast for you. Hello, welcome back to episode 8 of Becoming Natural, and I'm your host, Penny Sampler, and it is me. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold here. So last week, my friend told me that she didn't recognize my voice, and it's because I've been battling allergies up here. Kansas is killing me. I've never had allergies until I moved here. So I'm pretty excited about today's episode because it is titled 5 Helpful Strategies to Find Strength and Clarity to Overcome Chronic Illness. The very simple reason why I even started this podcast is because my hometown minister put the idea on my heart after I was released from my last hospital stay that my story needed to be told. So I designed this podcast with several clear pillars in my mind to keep it organized, mostly for me, but I've covered a bit of the science and research about my sticking my toe into the world of homeopathy coming from the medical model, which honestly, all of that completely lights my fire, and we will do way more of that in the future. I hope that you enjoy that. But then I worry that sometimes people think I'm getting into the weeds and that's a little thick. So I plan on going a little bit more high level into my next pillar of including tips and tricks that I learned on my way that helped me over the years. And another pillar is simply just living with Crohn's disease and what that's like and that reality and telling stories as I go, not only for people with Crohn's, but for people that maybe live with someone with Crohn's or who loves somebody with Crohn's, just to know what it's like. I've given a little bit of background as to how I got here and to what degree I experienced disease. But the biggest pillar here that I have not really acknowledged yet, but I've had my heart set on since before I even knew what a podcast was, is how I operated through my faith in Christ through the darkest and most difficult times. Today, we are diving into my faith piece. So there are so many amazing stories to tell, but this is where we will begin. And isn't it amazing how God works? I thought that, quote, telling my story naturally meant writing a book 15 years ago. But since then, I have seen writing blog posts and starting a podcast. Blog posts were not a thing, and podcasts were unheard of, to me anyway. Methods that weren't even around, to my knowledge, when my story began. So just when you think you have God figured out, but my faith guides my days, my every step. I am nowhere close to perfect by any stretch. I just strive to be better every day, and I am very strongly rooted in my faith, and I use that as my guide for almost every decision that I make. I know who I am. I know what I believe. I am grateful for that spiritual maturity early on because Lord knows I needed it. Clearly, God knew too. I have always been stubborn or driven. I don't know what best describes me. I'm sure my husband would love to help out with that one, but maybe both. I don't relent or give up easy if I have my mind set on something. Throughout my younger life, I often found myself repeating Philippians 4:13 over and over in my head. I learned that at a young age. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I did it when I forced myself to climb that dumb telephone pole and jump to the bar 10 feet out. It terrified me to death. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And when I climbed to the top of the rock wall, and I really didn't want to do it, but I forced myself to do it, pushing myself to run in a race that I really didn't want to run. I do these things to myself all the time, and I don't know why, but I play these games in my head where I challenge myself to go further, to push harder. I dare myself to do things. And then I have to prove it to myself that I can do it, that I can do hard things. Is anybody else like this, or am I just weird? So maybe I could be revealing a little bit more about me than I really intended. But back to how this podcast came about. While my mister encouraged me after my last surgery, it really started to form well before my minister planted those thoughts in my head. As the years of my illness progressed and the severity increased, for reasons only God knows, I wanted to be the North Star for anyone who had Crohn's disease behind me. When I was diagnosed, I knew no one who had Crohn's, and worse yet, I had never even heard of Crohn's before. I didn't even know much about my disease, as though I owned it. I worked in an acute care hospital with tragic, chronic patients with every kind of medical condition they could have. How could I have never heard of Crohn's disease? Yet today I hear about Crohn's and colitis. I hear it all the time. I see it in the charts at work. I see it in commercials. I meet people who have it. It's everywhere. I had plenty of support, but I had no one to turn to that knew exactly what I was feeling, and no one to truly ask questions outside of the time that I was sitting in my GI doctor's office, and he didn't even have my disease. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I decided to start a blog to hold all of my resources and my recipes and thoughts and lessons to point anyone who needed help when I was first learning how to manage my disease better. Friends and friends of friends were beginning to reach out because I was the only person that they knew who had Crohn's, and their friend or their family member needed a friend because they were just diagnosed or they wanted information about things that I knew. So I loved being able to point them to that blog, kind of held all the information to help them with ideas and simply read how my story unfolded. As I read over many of those blog posts years later, I read how my story had unfolded, and somehow I had this spiritual maturity to close many of those posts with, I can't wait to tell you how my story ends. And somehow I knew I would be around to tell the ending of my story. I knew early on that God was using me. I wanted to be used for a bigger purpose. I had no idea how, but I never doubted God. I was never angry with God. I just wanted to be used by him somehow. I knew that that was something I wanted. So I have this quote, and it's from the C.S. Lewis Institute blog that I will cite in the show notes. And it says, "Every life is a plan of God." The Bible shows us many and varied examples of this. Consider God's purpose for the prophet Jeremiah. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Jeremiah 1:5. Or his plan for the Apostle Paul. "When he who had set me apart before I was born and who called me by his grace was pleased to reveal his Son in me in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles." God has plans not just for these notable figures in the Bible like these, but for each of us in our own generation, plans which he has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Ephesians 2:10. Our great concern and frequent prayer, as it says in this blog, should be for God to fulfill his plans for our life. What a tragedy it would be to discover at Judgment Day, when we are at the seat of Christ, that we had not fulfilled his purposes for our lives, but we had filled our own purposes for our lives. So how do we know what his purposes are for our lives? That's a big question, but I think the way that I answer that is I always pray for his will to be done. I don't pray for necessarily my direct needs or wants, but I just pray that whatever I have, I want his will to be done in my life. I really didn't know if that meant helping someone with Crohn's, or of the hundreds of healthcare workers that I encountered, helping them in some way, or on a much smaller scale, closer to home with my children, seeing me endure an illness and just keep plugging along. Or maybe it had absolutely nothing to do with my health. I did not know how God would use me or my struggles, but I look at my young self and think I was more mature then than I am now, because I was completely mission-minded at the time. And I think often that's when you're ill and you're driven by pain and you're just so focused like that. We kind of rest on our laurels when life is good. It is what kept me moving, though, is use me. I really want to be able to tell people I was healed. I wanted to be a walking testimony. I wanted that healing story because I truly believed that God could do it. It was just a matter of if he would do it. If that was in the cards for me, would he use me in other ways that didn't include being healed? Would I always be in pain? The common theme through each of my posts as I read through them was that my disease and my extreme pain could be used for the good of someone else, that someone else could prevent their own suffering by learning something from me through my own suffering. Oh, I desperately wanted to save people from my pain. Like, it was so bad that just let me be the one to suffer so that you don't have to. Romans 8:28 tells us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I don't know how to put into words how brutal Crohn's disease is. While I was surrounded with love and support from my family and friends, at the end of the day, I really was alone with just me and my mind vending pain. Chronic pain can drive you absolutely insane. There were days that I operated entirely in the red. It took my breath away, and it stole so many hours and days from my family, from being a mom. Everyone who loved me wanted to take that pain from me. I know that they did. It was always there. They hated watching me go through it. And other times, it was not only there, it would bring me to my knees with excruciating times of pain, breathless, motionless on the floor kind of pain. No one could help me as desperately as they wanted to. I had to find a way through the pain alone. It was just me, awful pain, and God. We had a lot of time together. James speaks of trials and temptations in James 1:2-4. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." And in my efforts to protect my husband from seeing me in pain, I tried so hard to not complain, which, by the way, not the way to do it if you're married. I would get irritable with the pain or snappy, and he would have no idea why, because I pretended I was great. I'm just great. Everything's fine. All is well. I had to learn to let him in more, tell him when I was hurting so he could understand, because he felt in the dark when all he wanted to do was to help me. And that was really difficult for me, and really almost impossible for me to let my friends in on the depths of my pain. I absolutely did not want anyone worrying about me, because they would. I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be a normal mom. I had incredible friends, and they would totally worry about me if they knew that I was struggling. On a little side note here, after my first surgery, which was emergent and a really difficult recovery, I was still single. I was determined to raise awareness of Crohn's disease and be philanthropic in the Crohn's and colitis world. So I found a local Crohn's and colitis group and showed up ready to change the world. And I am not sure what I expected. Maybe not that everyone in the group had severe Crohn's. I'm not sure. My heart went out for them. But as I introduced myself to the circle of apparent regulars at these meetings, one by one, they told me their name and how sick they were and how many surgeries they all had, all in the double digits. They talked about how they didn't leave the house much, or they weren't able to make new friends because their illness dictated kind of their schedule or their lifestyle. I'm sure my face completely showed it, because I thought I was invincible at this point, but it was the most depressing meeting I've ever attended. And I am certain, in their defense, they drew a great amount of support from each other. And it was like group therapy. And I completely respect that, as I'm sitting here saying I had no one to talk about. But oh my word, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I made up my mind right there that I would not be the Debbie Downer in the room. I would get it every ounce of energy that I had to not let this terrible disease own me. I knew it would affect me, absolutely. But I was single and young, and I had a bright future ahead of me. I still had hopes and dreams of getting married and being a mom. I was choosing to live. I think that glimpse into my future was just burned into my brain, because I was determined that I will never be that person if I could control it. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. By the time I met my husband, I had had 2 major abdominal surgeries, but he never knew me sick. He had no idea, bless him. As health issues started brewing again after my second son, I had a spiritual trifecta, which I've mentioned before, but that's the only way I know how to describe it. I was going through a massive spiritual growth, but I had no idea what was coming. I was in a women's Bible study that challenged me to find that purpose for my life, and it left me speechless. This may sound really easy to many people, but for me, it absolutely blew my mind. I had never once considered what my job on earth was supposed to be. Beyond my house, beyond my walls, beyond my family, I always wanted to be a mom, and I had 3 hilarious and healthy boys. I had never thought beyond my days with my kiddos and sleepless night what my life's purpose was, and it really, really bothered me. I was really convicted by this. I was still in the depths of sleeplessness from having an infant, exhaustion, and added to it a chronic illness. So don't get me wrong, moms. I knew being a mom was a huge job, an important and valuable job. I was working to raise 3 little toots into men, and we were having the time of our lives with only the best memories of those days. I loved my mom job. I loved those boys. They were my everything, and they were incredibly entertaining. But when those boys flew the coop, what was I working towards in life? I knew it was a long ways off, but what was my identity outside of mom or wife? I had already worked hard in school. I got my master's degree. I was skilled at my job. I had ultimately accomplished my life goals that I had worked towards for so many years. And then I became a stay-at-home mom. So I got to go to school. I got a degree. I got a good job. I got married. I had kids. I wasn't having an identity crisis per se, but I was really digging deeper to discover how God wanted to use my skills, my experiences, and my life. I hadn't realized that I had already checked off all the boxes of 10-year-old Penny. What was next? Who was I? What was I living for? And how could I impact the greater world around me? My head was spinning, and I was totally befuddled. The second piece of my spiritual awareness, I guess, was mentioned before when our Sunday school class asked anyone to volunteer to share their testimonial. Of course, it was a volunteer thing, but everyone was doing it, and I completely panicked. I didn't have a testimony. I had a pretty easy life. I had no major challenges. I do not know when I became a Christian. I was raised in a great family. It never crossed my mind that my health issues were a testimony at all. I just never gave value to the disease that I had, and I didn't talk about it with anyone. But I all of a sudden felt incredibly spiritually inadequate, not knowing my life's purpose before me, not having a testimony behind me. All of this was on my heart and spinning in my head for weeks and weeks before the third piece of God's plan basically tipped the scales of my self-examination. But my husband and I were in a service that the minister challenged us to pray for trials. And the intention was that when you experience trials, you lean into your faith, you pray more, and your faith grows. And we talked about this. Like, are we in this together? One of us can't do this alone. We got to be braced for this. So I had all these swirling thoughts of not being enough, not feeling like I had a long-term life plan. And then we started to pray for trials. And isn't it kind of funny how quickly those prayers were answered for trials? My husband chose to leave his job, which was his entire career. My health took a nosedive from an already precarious place. We decided to move to more land into a new school district. And with John leaving his job, he had some inward soul searching to do as well, at the same time that I was going deep, because he was leaving his job partially because of me. He was an hour commute away. He worried about me, and I hated him worrying about us with an already stressful job, which only added to my feelings of not being enough, not being good enough to be a mom, to manage these kids by myself, and guilty that my husband married a sickie and that he had to worry about being alone with the kids, if something were to happen. We got our answers to challenges for sure. So fast forward, after I beat the odds, thanks to so many prayers and skilled hands, doctors and nurses, and I overcame severe sepsis from removing most of my stomach after years of painful Crohn's disease. My minister told me those miracles that we witnessed as a family and the healing that I experienced throughout my ordeal was not meant to be kept to ourselves, but to be shared with those who prayed for me, so they knew that their prayers were answered, with intentions of increasing their faith in prayer, and also shared with people who may or may not have known me then, like you right now, so that they could hear the story and witness the power in prayer over my body and my healing. And at that time, I received his words, I heard his words, but it really wasn't something that I could address at the time. I wasn't there yet. At that time, I was just focusing on healing my body physically, while I may have been walking and talking, building my endurance and taking on new of my last few surgeries. Like, I still got to go home after we were hoping the sepsis was gone, but I had 3 more additional surgeries after that, which was a whole nother year basically of surgeries and recovery. But I had a temporary ostomy, so I had an ostomy takedown the minute he told me I could. I had a surgical fistula, which means when your organs get touched too much abnormally, like by hands, I guess, they protect themselves. And so I developed a fistula that was very painful. And then the grand finale of surgeries, which was totally expected, but closing me up tight. I had a hernia from sternum to pubic bone, which they just left me kind of not totally zipped up because they wanted to make sure that all the infection was gone. So this meant I was really healed when I got that hernia repair. And thank goodness, because after 13 surgeries, a body just needs some time to recover. It required lots of time and lots of patience. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I was not yet mature enough to recognize that I needed to do more healing than just physical healing. I was obviously mom, and my primary focus of my entire ordeal was, what boxes do I need to check to be mom again? And every one of those boxes required something physical in nature. Get the ostomy removed. Check. Walk to the end of the driveway. Check. Then to the end of the block. Fold laundry without resting. Drive my kids to school. Push a vacuum again. In my mind, as a mom, as an occupational therapist, my healing was 100% focused on what my physical capabilities were and what they weren't. I was still a work in progress when it came to understanding what whole body healing meant. It took a while for me to figure that out. I did stew on my minister's words a bit and decided it would be good to add to my blog the incredible miracles that we did witness. I did not entertain writing about the difficult or the dark days, as those days I was not ready to address, nor did I even think I wanted to remember them. But while it was fresh, I did take the time to write the details of not only how things came to happen, but also the amazing people, friends, family, miracles. People came out of the woodwork for us. We were literally carried by a village. It was humbling. It's so humbling to receive when you want to be a giver. But all the things that truly changed my life in a good way, we recorded. In my mind, telling my story meant I needed to write a book. That's all I knew. So the first few blogs were a perfect way to begin. But roughly 2 years later, I thought that I was healed because my body was working great. I had moved to a new city. I was playing tennis. I was meeting new friends. I felt pretty normal, although I was still on a steady dose of opiates for the post-surgical pain. To be clear, the Crohn's pain was gone. This was from all the surgeries and all the operations. So I decided that maybe it was time that I was ready to truly tell my whole story. I needed to share the hard, the yucky, the difficult, and the dark, because that was how I could minister to those in my shoes now. Because in complete transparency, I know I went through a whole lot, but I still wasn't even really aware that anybody would want to hear my mess of a story. It wasn't pleasant or fun to hear. It was full of lots of pain and disappointment. My family was traumatized by it all. My husband still has a hard time. He's barely read the chapter in the book that I wrote because it's too hard. It was a hard time. And who wants to hear about Crohn's disease or a very brutal months of horrific pain? There were no rainbows and unicorns to that part of what happened to me. These were definitely Job times. If you're familiar with the book of Job in the Bible, I read it all the time. But Job 36:15 says, "But those who suffer, he delivers in their suffering. He speaks to them in their affliction." And this was such a time that even my husband, we just felt that while it was the worst time of our life, it was the best time of our life. We were praying together all the time. We had prayer warriors praying for us all the time. We were watching and waiting for miracles to occur. They're happening all around us every day, by the way. We're just too busy to notice them. And this was a big learning experience for me. We just need to slow down. We are too busy. Miracles are around us all the time. So the more I thought about it, and I'm talking over weeks, I decided that the only way for someone to look at me now and understand how God worked in my life was to somehow describe in all its gory details how truly awful it was. And I'm a walking miracle, I know this, who by all accounts looks and acts and feels completely healthy. People don't heal from Crohn's disease. As I've been told, I am not healed, but I know I'm healed. They tell me my Crohn's is inactive. But the story my minister was referring to was finding a way to impart where I came from, how bad it really got, how hard we fought, and how beautifully the Lord worked in our lives. This is so much harder for me than you might think, as I have spent my entire illness trying to pretend that I don't feel bad or that I wasn't in pain, or worse, not even telling the closest of friends how sick I really was. I was constantly trying to be normal, and I certainly didn't want my sweet boys having any reason to worry about me, because they did worry about me. They knew. I knew that they were aware that I had some illness and some issues. So I started to write a chapter at a time. And it was not in order of occurrence, but just kind of as things came to me. And I would write a chunk of the story that I thought to tell. And I actually stared at the screen for days, not knowing where to begin. Do I start when I was born? Or do I tell how I grew up, when my first symptoms started? Did I start at the end of the story and work backwards? I'm not a writer, and I had no idea really what I was doing at all. But I did want to make sure I was able to reveal how truly covered in prayer I was, and how firmly we believe that those thousands of prayers by friends and strangers and prayer groups, amazing people that would text us all the time to tell us that I was being prayed for, that those prayers were holding me together. And they were holding me together not only physically, but emotionally for 20 years. There were days I cried begging for prayers to be answered, not ever seeing that the beautiful life that I had as a wife and a mom and a pretty somewhat normal life was all of those prayers allowing me to be who I wanted to be, without my illness dictating me entirely, without my illness preventing me from having babies. I'm not saying that I was super strong, because every day I was weaker and weaker and weaker. And I'm not saying that I am perfect in my faith, because there were days that I was so desperately wanted to be healed and in such terrible pain. I wanted to know why, God, are you not healing me? I doubted at times if I would be healed on earth. And I prepared myself for the fact that I might not be without pain until the day that I died. I had plenty of times that I started to circle the drain with my thoughts, but something always stopped me from going too far. I never gave up on God's ability to heal me. I knew that He could. I know that God can heal me. I read the book of Job at least 100 times, and I cringed at the part where the poor guy sat on a rock, picking his oozing sores all alone with broken pottery, when everyone that he loved, he either lost or they deserted him. So I'm going to read this for you if you haven't read Job as often as I have. But Job 2:7 starts that Satan left and caused painful sores to break out over Job's body from head to toe. Important to note that if you've never read Job, it's a conversation between God and Job. And basically, Satan feels like he can take down Job. And God is saying, Job is such a faithful servant. Job is not going to fall to you. He is strong, and he is a man after my heart, and he will not be tempted by you. So the entire book is talking about Satan tempting him, and then Job withstanding his temptation. And then, okay, I'm going to go a little further. Okay, I'm going to take his family members. Okay, I'm going to take his food. So that's the whole premise of Job. So Job 2:8, then Job sat on the ash heap to show his sorrow. And while he was scraping his sores with a broken piece of pottery, his wife asked him, why do you still trust God? Why don't you curse him and die? I mean, she isn't lying, but sad. His wife was not very supportive, but I think that I do have more of a heart for Job when he replied, and he said, don't talk like a fool. If we accept blessings from God, we must also accept trouble. In all that happened, Job never once said anything against God, because he firmly believed if we receive blessings, we can't expect life to be perfect. We have to accept the difficult with the easy. And I agree with that. But God was always with him. The message that God knew Job could be tested by Satan and withstand his temptations really convicted me. God was not part of my pain. Satan was issuing my pain. God knew me. He trusted me to have faith in his good, holy, and just plan for me, despite how bad it had gotten. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So just like in Job, he allowed Satan to test me and my family and my marriage, but that empowered me even more. I rebelled against that because John and I were on our knees daily, if not more. While my life appeared to be falling apart, we had never been stronger in our marriage, in our faith, in our gratitude. We were literally living on a wing and a prayer. And if this was a spiritual battle, over my dead body was Satan going to win. God knew I was stubborn and a fighter, and he seemed to have faith in my ability to not be beat. And if he knew this, and he knew me, and how I could not fall, how could I not trust him over me? How could I not trust that God was going to take care of me? Because I was not giving in. Satan may take down my body. He was not taking down my faith. He was most definitely not taking down my heart or my family. I realized that through a very stubborn nature and a strong will, I had a message to share with those who were going through the fight of their lives. I wanted to share how I clung to my faith and how God always showed up for me or for my family just when we needed him. God never, ever, ever let us down. So many people tend to run from God and resent God when bad things happen and blame God. But I count it a blessing to be challenged. God is not the one. He is not orchestrating pain. He is not doing that. We live in a fallen world. It is Satan that is providing these challenges and pain and difficulties. So we need to turn to God and trust in him that he knows our challenges and he knows that they'll make us stronger. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it." He has the emergency exit. If you can't handle it, he has that exit. But he will not put you in a position that you cannot handle it. And I knew that, and I know that. And then there's that crazy person inside of me that's pushing me to, I can do just a little bit more. I can do just a little bit more. That was wound care. That's another podcast. That was horrible. But that was not going to be me. I was going to dig and dig and dig until I could find out the why. Why was God allowing me to endure this level of pain and suffering? And compared to Jesus, was I really suffering? Who was I to complain? I didn't deserve to be in pain-free. I didn't deserve to have a perfect life. I didn't deserve anything. I had a spiritual strength that I know the Lord had been molding since I was a little girl. I come from a long line of amazing Jesus-loving family members, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. My parents were strong in their faith, and they lived it out at home. I grew up going to an amazing summer camp that really helped root me in my convictions and learn who I was in Christ at a very young age, much younger than most kids. I'm fairly certain that was God's plan, but I was also blessed with amazing friends that remain my dearest friends today, that God bless them, have prayed over me so much that they probably have logged totals in days of prayer for me versus hours. Like, I have used up the prayer list over and over again. But we as a whole were very spiritually mature for high schoolers, praying together, even in middle school. I was so blessed to not only have spiritual friends that truly loved me, but we were all blessed to have incredible spiritual mentors in our lives. Our youth leaders lived out their lives in our small town as a family, raising kids, almost as second parents, even though they were much younger than our parents. But they were fun and cool, and where we spent our weekend nights hanging out till curfew with all of our friends. Those friends and leaders encouraged me to this day. They remain a constant in my life of people I know that love me and pray for me. I could call them up in a heartbeat, and how incredibly blessed I was then and continue to be blessed now by their friendship. So through all the great in my life, I finally started to see that perhaps a piece of my ministry or purpose, if that's what it is, was to share what it takes to be a survivor, to remain positive in the most difficult times, times when you think you can't take one more step, you can't take another breath. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Things may have come easy for me in school and friends and sports, but I had this massive growing battle with my health that for some reason people wanted to hear about. And I pushed myself to be more open about my struggles, not because I was embarrassed or even unwilling. I am a wide open book, probably more open than people want me to be, but I was a student and I worked in a hospital and I had to learn on patients. And so I don't mind allowing other people to learn from my issues or to learn from my disease, to teach someone else how to take care of themselves or to teach a student in the hospital what I'm feeling or how I'm going through. I simply didn't want to cause drama or draw unnecessary attention to my battle. But I do find that humor is really the only way through it. Humor is what heals your heart. So I was more than willing to laugh, tell completely self-deprecating stories, expose all the things related to having a GI disease that, for the most part, included poop or throw up in every single story. Sorry, this is about Crohn's. Sorry. I had to tell the ugly in order to see how incredibly beautiful my completed story was. 2 Corinthians 12:9-10 is now my favorite verse. I keep it with me close always. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." I absolutely love that verse because I know that when I was in the hospital and people would compliment me, and I really hated it because they would tell me, "Oh, you're so strong, Penny." And I knew without a doubt I was not strong at all. I was the weakest that I had ever been. I had nothing left in my tank. My mental strength was depleted. I had been in the hospital for 3 months at this time, away from my children. And I knew in hindsight, after I read this verse, that everything that anybody saw that was anything close to strength, I'm not sure what strength was, but that was totally Christ. He stepped in. So when I am weak, then I am strong, because when I am weak and I allow Christ to just totally take over and I surrender, he takes over and he takes care of me. And that is amazing that Christ knows who I am. He knows who Penny is. He knows what I need and he knows how to stand for me. So I'm going to close with my 5 tips for surviving chronic illness. Number 1, be grateful. Count your blessings. Look for all the good that surrounds you and know that a heart full of gratitude is so much healthier for your entire body. That goes into your stress hormones and all the things than a mouthful of complaints. Nobody wants to hear complaints all the time. And I know that there's pain and there's struggles and there's suffering, but you just never want to be the person that is constantly complaining. And those complaints also add to your mental health. So just like James said earlier, consider it pure joy when you encounter trials of any kind. Like, count that as joy. Okay, I am being challenged. Why am I being challenged? And try to figure out and focus on those gratitude moments, those blessings. Look for all the good. Number 2, memorize a helpful scripture or lyrics to a song, something that redirects your thoughts when you're in the midst of something difficult or painful. So for me, obviously, Philippians 4:13 gets me a long ways. I love praise and worship music, and I can't sing a tune, but I know lots of lyrics to lots of songs because so many praise and worship music songs are based on scripture. Oh my goodness, they can change my life. I love them so much to listen to a lyric, or a lyric will pop into my head. I know that one very difficult time for me, I was in the MRI machine and I was very scared and I could not think of anything to say. And I remember the scripture that said, when you don't know what to say, just say Jesus. And so as I was being pushed in and out of this machine, this was like the 10th time I'd been in it, over 3 months. And the guy had said, "Oh, you're still here." Yes, I am still here. All I did was just try to remember every name I could for Jesus. Jesus, Elohim, Father, Rapha, El Shaddai. I just went down the list and I just stated every single name that I could think of while I was in that machine. And it is amazing the peace that came over my body just using the name of Jesus. So there's a little tip. Number 3, mindset. I'm not a huge fan of the word mindset. That's kind of a thing everybody says. But think about this. If God is for you, who can be against you? We know that God wins, always. God always wins. And there is a song by Chris Tomlin that I absolutely love. I fell asleep crying to it every night in the hospital. And one of the lines says, I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. Satan does not get to win. And I would just imagine as they were pushing me down the hall or as I was going to sleep, that this huge formation of, 8-foot, huge, strong angel beings were escorting me to wherever I was going. And it just empowered me and made me feel like I'm totally surrounded by angels. And I know that I was. There's lots of reasons I know that, but just know that if God is for you, who can be against you? And He is watching over you, and He is guarding you, and He has sent His angels to take care of you. Number 4, don't focus on the hard. I remember my husband would always tell me, go take a nap, go lay down, go rest. Absolutely, I couldn't do it because it made me focus on the pain in my stomach. I had to go, because if I wasn't going, then I was thinking about the pain. That's probably not the best solution for everybody, but that is how I managed my pain or pushed through it. And I just didn't focus on how hard things were. I focused on the good things, the blessings. Come on, kids, let's go do this. Let's go take a walk to the park. Let's go play outside. Let's go find friends. I was always trying to focus on fun stuff. It was a mental game for me. Finally, something I am really, really learning right now, and I think it is absolutely vital regardless of if you're sick or not, but you have got to make time for peace. Absolute peace. Laying outside, walking in the grass barefoot, listening to praise and worship music, listening to your music that's calming, praying, sitting in total silence where you can hear your ears ringing. It is completely renewing to have a moment of silence, to be there. I remember doing yoga and those last 5 minutes, it's so restorative and you feel so renewed. You feel like you've had a 30-minute nap. To prioritize peace, for me, I always felt like that was a luxury for being able to have a few minutes to sit by myself. No. I am working very hard right now on making it a priority, making it a daily act for me to create a certain amount of time for peace in my life. And that might just be sitting in silence. It might be sitting in a chair outside looking at the leaves and hearing the wind blow or seeing the birds or, just looking at the sky, going out at night and looking at the stars. Our body is made to renew. It has to be renewed. And we are in such a busy society that we just go, and then we drop into bed. And then we go, and then we drop into bed. We are missing the world around us, and we are missing the things that renew us and bring us strength. So I leave you with that. I hope you have a blessed day. I hope that you learned something from today, and I look forward to coming back next week. Have a good one.
If you're interested in checking out our anthology devotional, look for the link in the show notes. More Than Enough, The Silent Struggle of a Woman's Identity is divided into 6 sections. More than your past, more than your religion, more than your body, more than your job, more than a wife, and more than a mom. It was awarded the Barnes & Noble bestseller designation in just 5 days of pre-launch. It ranked number 1 in the religion category, number 40 bestseller out of all pre-orders at Barnes & Noble, and each author received a Barnes & Noble best-selling author designation. You don't want to miss it. If you enjoyed today's episode, would you take 30 seconds to leave a review and share it with a friend? It helps me help someone else, and reviews are the best way to do that. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll meet you back here for another episode next week.